Okay, it is
Eve
7,
of Europa is one of them.
All we have to do is work those.
better known as 1 in the morning in
1 in the morning, huh?
Eastern Europe time.
That's what it is, huh?
Public comment. Anyone have any comments this evening? If not, we're going to go right to the agenda. I had a little time to get caught up with this with Deborah today, and I think I've got it down pretty well. And we're moving number 7 up to number 1 because we have Brian here. We want to talk, Brian, if you come up please and join us. We want to talk about the situation with CDPH. It's not pending litigation by any means. In fact, this is about a resolution. What we want to do is share with the board Article 7 that Brian's been working on. A couple weeks ago we had a meeting, Jim, Brian, and myself. We also met with the attorney representing CDPH, and we have what we believe is a good recommendation for settlement. I just mentioned that it's not pending, but we also want to, it's not closed yet either, so we just want to be careful about anything that would be sensitive to
I'm
confidential.
gonna say, does everybody have a copy of this? I emailed it to everybody.
I've got the copies for everyone right here.
Oh, actually, I didn't print it off. Yeah, I remember all of it.
Oh, I've got a hard copy as
He's
well.
got it, I guess.
Deborah takes care of it. Probably the first thing is a draft resolution that we might want to consider this evening.
I already had my question set.
And the second is those are extras. Those come back to Jim.
Oh,
The second item is the stipulation. I already gave you the draft. Those last two should come back to you. And here is the proposed settlement. Yep. And with that lead-in, I would go back to Brian. What we want to do is have the option this evening for entertaining the resolution so we can move on this. But what we want to do first is make sure everybody's comfortable with that, and Brian will maybe lay out what the Article 7 was about, what the request was, and how we propose to resolve it.
The Article 7 came about from me reading an article in the paper about the renal dialysis unit in this building. The building we're talking about is on Plaza Boulevard. When they said that they weren't making money, they're gonna give it to a private entity to make money, a light bulb went off. And having hit that time where Dr. Homer had to be used, he walked in and I realized that his office is private and the renal office was private. And I did some homework, and blood draw is a private business, MRIs are a private business, ambulatory surgeries are a private business. So I said, all right, I took the CDPH property and moved it out of wholly exempt rural section 8 and raised the assessment to $8 million and put them into taxable. 2013, Tom Plimpton, working for Owens, Curtin, Stafford's office, they grieved the value. They didn't grieve the not-for-profit status. They grieved $8 million to 5.5. And the bills went out. It's like, well, that's fine. You know, I thought that they would come after the not-for-profit status. 2014, this year, the same grievance came in again, this time in charge of the case. Mr. Clinton had his hiccup with the firm. So Brendan Owens is in charge, and he comes back with the same grievance, 8 to 5.5, but then he follows it up afterwards with wait a minute, this property should be not-for-profit. And he sat down and he did some case law search, and he broke through some stuff that Jim and myself and I went online, and I spent some time looking up to see if I couldn't find a refuting case law. We didn't. So the nuts and bolts of it, the amount of square footage in the facility that is taxable is 30%, 29 and change. We rounded up to 30, and 70% of that property would be not taxable. Well, they've paid taxes on the $8 million, school, county, town. So, in effect drafting a resolution. Jim had stated he'd like to have a 5-year term to repay, and
Without interest.
without interest. And we would like to weigh in some consideration of the fact that Homer's office has been in that building for years and has never paid taxes, although they should have, even on that percentage. And so, Jim basically threw it at Brendan saying, you know, come up with a couple of options for us to consider, and they gave us 2 options. And of the 2 options, the first option seemed a little bit better, in that lieu of the fact that it would be less of a payback on the entities, and considering time value of money, having the cash in our pockets better than having the cash in theirs. So, and then at the end of it, it came down to certain things, the percentages, which got a little obscured, didn't make the writing correct, so I went through and I did the math for all the entities of what the maximum refund would be. Total refund is stipulated in the agreement that Jim has was $123,000, right, and change there, of which $80,484.58 goes to the school. 28,500 is going to be the county. I'm rounding these numbers. And the town liability, all the special districts total 14,683. Highway being $4,600. Payable over 4 years with no interest. When you divide that up, it minimizes the impact of the refund. I do believe the school carries a tertiary fund, so they're really not impacted on that, as in their tax rates and stuff, because they've allotted the money into an account for paying back. Well, that's a topic that we'll discuss afterwards, but we will be having to owe by the 1st of September every year for 5 years. The end resolution was $7 million for their assessment. And then the refund on 70% of 7 million, so a refund on that first million from 8 to 7, then a refund on 4,900,000, but they waived 25% of that refund. The other option was full payback. They weren't waiving anything. Slightly higher assessment didn't really work out. Dollars and cents didn't make sense.
I'd add that Brian did a very good job crunching the numbers. It may sound simple, but not all that simple.
And that's how it is in a nutshell.
You said the full assessment value was $8 million.
It's now 7 million. That's
And
what
it
we
was
negotiated.
reduced due to this agreement, or was it
Correct.
reduced prior to that?
No, it will be, the assessment is, what do we say, it's fixed. It cannot be changed once the final roll goes out on July 1. So the agreement that you have is written to go to the judge saying, Your Honor, we've come to this settlement agreement. And the judge then will say, okay, so ordered, it will be reduced to $7 million.
And that is because that was valued incorrectly at the time?
No, it was a negotiated settlement, and that's, we negotiated, they would have been entitled to a refund, and we said, we'll do this if you give us a refund, no interest over 5 years. So there's 2 options.
70% of the profit. You just listed all those people that were private and should be paying taxes.
30%, right.
And that's only 30% of the building?
Correct.
Because it sounded like when you talked
When
about
you were
all
going
of them.
through your list, you said blood draw was private.
They have, the building is owned by the hospital. Their employees work the blood draw. Their employees work in the ambulatory, they assist Dr. Homer and Casone. Their employees run the MRI, so that's not private. But all of those businesses in there are also held by private entities. You have Industrial Med on Tom Miller Road for blood draw. You have Dr. Beach with an MRI over off Route 3 that does MRIs. So every business in there also competes in the market under private ownership My thinking being, if that's the case, then the hospital is actually out there providing services, competing in the open market against businesses. Put it on rule section 1 and see what happens.
What was the assessment before the 8 million?
5.5.
So it went from 5.5 to now the negotiated settlement would be,
7.
so, I mean, it was
Yeah,
a job.
yeah, I understand what you're
And
saying.
it went from
But
0 to
went from
30%.
100% down to 30%.
No, it was 0 before. We don't wanna miss what Brian did, it got corrected and we negotiated, but it was at 5, whatever. It's now going to be at 7,
You were actually,
and it
went-
was 0% before, and now it's 30% taxable.
So we're
correct,
saying
as a
that
whole,
The
correct.
reason that it's 70% non-taxable is because
The hospital owns
these
it.
private businesses are actually staffed by hospital staff.
No. The 30% taxable is a profit entity in a not-for-profit zone. That's taxable.
But the person that hold the company, they're liable for taxes, but they have CBPH staff, as you said,
CDPH is a
drawing blood and
not-for-
doing the other things.
A hospital is considered under real property law 420A, not-for-profit. They own title to the property, so in effect, that property, when they ran all of it, was a not-for-profit. Dr. Casone and Dr. Homer carved themselves out roughly 3,000 square feet and started running their private practice out of this building. And then a year ago, the renal dialysis unit was sold to a private practice.
And they make a profit, each of them.
Correct, so they have to pay taxes.
That's the 30%. What Brian was saying,
Well, according to this, we're agreeing to this for 5 years.
correct.
So what's to say
If
that
the
somebody else
use
doesn't
remains-
carve out a part of it?
If the use remains the same, that's
If
in
the
the
use
stipulation.
changes, it's in
And
there.
we change.
If there's a change in use, another private practice goes in there, that will be added, and the ratio would go from
Whatever it is.
from 70-30 to 60-40, or
Square footage.
50-50, or as it goes along.
I didn't.
That change, any change like that, as in the agreement here, would negate what we have today, and the proper application would be applied to it.
And it is a tricky thing, even with the 70%. I've written 2 articles actually in a magazine, which I'm sure all of you read every week, called the Tax Exempts. But anyway.
Oh, yes, every time you put it in there.
Although they just can't wait for tax exempts to come in. But it's very tricky. Brian and I have talked about this, particularly out west. What they say to hospitals is, what's the extent of your charitable contribution? Are you seeing a lot of people for free? Now, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Some of these big hospitals out west, they're saying you treat 2% of people who don't have money to pay, you treat 98% of profit, you know. They lose their exemption. All throughout the middle of them, tremendous number have lost exemption. So, but in New York State, the law seemed, there were a lot of cases, and they're all about the same. They're saying if you're drawing blood, what they're saying, the hospital draws blood, and because they don't have enough room, they move it over there and they draw blood. But as Brian said, you do have people in the private sector drawing blood too, and they pay taxes. So it's not a simple thing, but I don't think there's any chance we could have done better than the 70, or the 30.
Right.
5 years in interest.
Okay, that's that one building. Now, behind that, there's 2 other complexes.
Right,
Say
right.
Primary care and some others.
Mhm.
Those private,
Yes, you pay taxes,
and they're on the tax roll.
yes.
We haven't skipped any of those.
No.
Just check.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and again, I wanted to make sure as I was listening that we remember this is a adjustment after Brian actually picked up on the fact, challenged, and did a great deal of work to discover that what looked and appeared like a off-campus facility of the hospital, in fact, no longer was.
The bottom line is you went from 0 taxable assessment to $2.1 million taxable assessment on that property.
And what we did was we just made a mistake of charging too much the first year.
No, charging, assessing it at 100% versus 70. That was the.
You know what surprised me more than anything else, that they didn't bring it to our attention earlier than it was time.
Yeah.
That's a joke, but anyways.
I get it. And that's not going to happen. In fact, I asked the foolish question about, what about what you owe us for as long as these? It was so foolish, I stopped it before it all came out.
The other positive is it's 1 year done. It's not like everybody was buried into it for 4 or 5. Well, statute of limitations on these cases, 4 years. Probably a good segue to go to other discussions. But
Well, it is, and I'm going to put it on the table, but we're not going to discuss it because we're not ready to this evening, but
okay.
it really does surface a number of things. And one is that Brian and I spoke a little today. We need to, we're gonna be, I want you to be involved, Jim, Pat especially, to try and determine what our exposure is. I mean, we have Article 7s all the time. My comment today was, there are a lot of municipalities that look at the town of Plattsburgh and say, oh, you know, it must be nice, you have Schluter and Fujitsu and Nova and this, and you don't see what comes with it. And one of the things that we have to accept as a reality is we're going to have Article 7s. For example, we have companies like a Target, like a Pyramid, that have their retained firm that they simply will challenge, period. Knowing for most municipalities, they don't have the expertise like a Brian. They don't have the resources to go out there and do a appraisal with a third-party professional. It's very expensive. They roll over and play dead. If you look at the distribution of funds, the one most impacted, of course, is the school district. The town, and again, it underscores our very low tax base, our hit on this is the smallest. I don't want to say it's minor, but relative to the numbers on the table, it's minor. What we need to do, though, and we need to do it to protect our budget, and we need to do it to be prepared to support our assessor, is have a budget line that has an anticipated fund for the purpose of managing these Article 7s. If we have to go out and get an appraisal, the money's there. It can seem nice to keep the budget down, and you hope you don't need it. We do a lot of negotiating. But if you get there, then you're scrambling for the funds. Now, talk to us very briefly, give us a couple examples of appraisals that you've done before, and what the costs are relative to the property.
Well, we have been, the longest case on the list is the former Ames building and the Rosebud Gibraltar, GBR or Gibraltar. They own 3 parcels there. They own the Rosebud parcel, which half of it's leased to Texas Roadhouse. They own where they tore down, and then they own a chunk of land 15 acres in behind that. So GBR has been suing the town of Plattsburgh since, I'm gonna have to say, at least 2008. And sometime back, the 2009, 2010, and 2011 tax years, that was all vacant land. And we had gone out and asked our appraiser for a court-certified appraisal, court-ready appraisal, and he ran us $4,000 for those 3 parcels for those 3 years. I think $1,800 we paid and $3,200 the school paid because of the split that we have with Beacon Town Central School. So we were in negotiations with them to come to a compromise on investment again. They think it's worth $100,000. We think it's worth $1 million. Basically, that's what happens with these guys, right?
If they'll take 100,000, I'll write a check.
Yeah, that's right.
It's always 10% of whatever your assessment is. So we're negotiating, and the guy's trying to negotiate into the future, and it's like, well, wait a minute. And he says, what? The lawyer there, Mr. Cronin. I said, you're not considering the fact that Texas Roadhouse was built in 2012. We do not have an appraisal on Texas Roadhouse. Oh, it says you haven't, said, not what I'm doing. We're not talking about appraisal work on it yet. This is not acceptable. I'm not gonna go into an agreement with a set value when you're not even weighing the improvements of Texas Roadhouse, their lease. So, I was told to kick them another year. Well, I decided, go to 14, tell them, okay, we're in November, Sorry, Sean. We're gonna wait till 2014, you're gonna refile your petitions again anyway. We'll reorder an appraisal for 12, 13, and 14, these 3 years. Charlie Francis has a quote that ends on the end of this month on my desk for $6,720 or so for this next appraisal because of the improvements that play into it now.
It's not raw land, now he's gotta do a building and contents.
And analyze the lease Texas Roadhouse has and exactly what their business is all about. So that's our oldest case. The good news is, after the 31st, that 2010 is no longer valid. It gets dropped off the caseload because the statute of limitations is over. We have another one here that's gonna come around the bank, TD Bank, here on the corner. They say they're worth $500,000, the assessment on it is $1 million. Same thing, this, July 31st comes, that 2010 year will be able to drop. However, I think that lawyer has already gotten an appraisal done because it was a firm out of Albany who came up and did an appraisal on that.
When you say drop, do you mean they have to pay what we assessed that?
No, the case
Statute of limitations.
statute of limitations. You get past certain dates, those years are no longer valid, the judge will just.
Remember, Tom is saying, that's what Tom is saying, I think, we, that they have to pay whatever we said.
Correct, for that year, right, they don't, right.
I guess the
I'm sorry, I missed
point
that. Thank you.
without, and that's why I said we wanna go through this in some more detail, we're just not ready tonight. The point is, it's another one of the things the assessor does, and working with the attorneys, representing these properties, and trying obviously to resolve things, if there's a reasonable solution, so they don't become expensive, but it doesn't always work that way, and the larger the company, they could care less about trying to resolve it outside of court. We can't go to court without having an appraisal. The appraisal costs money. We don't have a line in the budget. We should have one, and I think it should be in the general fund as opposed to Brian's, because it is an expense I think is appropriate there. And then if something comes up, we're prepared. Otherwise, we're scrambling. What do we have to cut? Where do you move money? It just doesn't seem like good business. And the other thing, Brian mentioned the school district has a fund because they anticipate these challenges and the paybacks. We should consider that as well. Ours, the good news is small, but the bad news is if you don't have a line and you do have a payback,
You gotta find it.
technically, where's it coming from? It's just not good budgeting to not anticipate an expense that's a real expense. Now, if it doesn't happen that year, you can roll it over. If it gets settled and there are no paybacks, then you didn't spend the money. If we can't afford to budget it, how can we afford to pay it? So I want us to work on that. What I'd like Brian to do is he'll pull together a sheet of how many Article 7s we have, what is the exposure. Most of them never get to this group because we deal with them before. With the CVPH, though, we have this resolution for the board to support this negotiated settlement, which we think is fair.
And this is also the stretch to the things that we were talking about, salaries and retirements and things like that, anticipated.
Well, yeah,
We need to have.
and you gotta try to build realistic budgets or you never make it through the year.
Brian, I'd be curious as we get down this road a little bit further, your thoughts and opinions are certainly going to come to the forefront about what we need to challenge and support you with particular cases, but what other municipalities have as a budget line. In comparison, how many cases, we asked Phil to do something very similar when he was looking to increase some of the fee structures. I don't want to be going at this blindly. Just because we have 7 on the docket this year doesn't mean that we're going to have 7 next year.
Actually, I would almost say that you're gonna have 15 more.
Sure, right. But what I'm curious though is what are other municipalities doing? Let's learn from some of the folks.
Well, it depends, it's like the same as you're here. I took a course beginning of November called certiorari, the guy was he's an expert witness, taught it. he has done this in multiple times for different municipalities. Some do prepare, as Bernie is saying, some don't. They're just caught unawares. One assessor in the Buffalo area has opted to be very proactive, and that was the song at my tertiary class, is proactive. You tend to have, like Mr. Clute in the city, just let him sit on the shelf until somebody says it's time to do this, you know, and a couple of years fall off. But what would happen if you had a pyramid of $50 million is that money you're talking about could be a $20 million swing. That's a lot of tax. And what happens is the pyramid lets it go for that many years, and then they come back and they say, by the way, guess what your refund's gonna be? You're gonna have to go out and borrow for this. So you have to stop back and say, whoa, okay, how do we treat this guy? Now, most of the firms, most of the people on here, Bill Russell and Owens being the locals, but most of these guys, their firms specialize in this. This is all they do. So they get AutoZone, they get UPS, and they blitz everywhere there's an AutoZone, and they blitz everywhere there's a UPS with the mimeograph. It's billable hours, right? They want it to carry on. Because next year it's more billable hours, more billable hours. Said and done is if your proactiveness comes in, well, sorry, being Italian, when you, when it comes in though, if you say, okay, let's take care of this now, then it tends to have, so this guy in Buffalo went proactive, and he doesn't get lawsuits anymore, because he knows the companies, these guys all put him in the file saying, no, that's gonna cost us money, we're gonna need an appraisal right away, we're gonna go to court, there's no billable hours in this, now it's actual work. So, it's a philosophy that we'll adapt. I will check other municipalities to see where they are, similar size to us, Watertown, even the guy in Buffalo, to see what his actions are, Saratoga, that kind of stuff, to see, because they're all in areas that have commercial mixed stuff.
Well, I'm just expressing my shock that attorneys were interested in billable hours.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
The other thing that I think is generic to this, and Brian will present that to us, he just does a good job with numbers and represents them well. But I went through the stack of papers this morning, and in speed reading, it amazed me how little there really was to read, and most of the issues that I missed. But I did slow down on an article concerning the comptroller's audit of Willsboro. And the thing that caught my eye, and I should be careful because I didn't read it for great detail, but the general comment was with a lot of concern about an awful lot of oversight by the board, the supervisor, and not having checks and balances and procedures in place. The clerk's office was hit on big time. As we know, in a lot of towns though, you have, most towns, you have part-time supervisors and you have full-time clerks. And between the secretary, the supervisor, and the clerk, they tend to run those towns to a great degree. And a board that has a meeting maybe once a month, not every Monday. But the thing that caught my eye, and as I kind of reflected on people like Brian, our department heads, we've got some good expertise, people that are skilled and well-trained. It appears through there, especially the clerk, was reflecting on how with the cap and other constraints, they had let people go, people had retired, they had not replaced, they just didn't have the staff. And I heard words that were so similar of, the money's there, but the clerk was collecting the payments for this and that, and kind of didn't know where to go. They didn't have a finance manager, and, this is the way it is. They simply didn't have the personnel, the well-trained staff. And,
Left out of those discussions is also the change in the political scene that goes on. You get a new supervisor that comes in, you get, there's a gross lack of communication going on, in some cases intended. And then the other person who comes in is not of the same political party.
yeah, there's no requirement for a transfer of anything.
Yeah.
you know, you bring your team in and the other, you know, burns the bridges as they go out sometimes. But it really underscored the value of your team. It really underscored some of the damage that we'll continue to see with municipalities, schools, in some cases too, I'm sure, working without the resources that they need until you get into trouble. And now what do you do?
I've noticed, speaking of that, by going to New York City and attending some of these clerk sessions down there, how some of them don't have to do like I do on a monthly basis with all the reports for all the departments to give them stuff. They don't hand out anything.
Yep.
And, you know, I said, we collect money for all the departments here and handle all that money, and every dollar that comes in is given a receipt, and the receipts match up to the reports that go to all the departments and to the supervisor.
It's called checks and balances.
Yeah, right, I know that, but I'm just saying, that's,
But you gotta have the people, you
Exactly.
gotta have the.
I just couldn't understand it,
They
with,
just don't
you
do it.
know? Somebody bigger than us is doing less than what we're doing.
And it's gone on for years and years and years.
Exactly. It's just-
And the comptroller's last couple of years with very formally getting into the books of all these
Of everybody.
municipalities, they're surfacing it.
Yeah.
But I had to be somewhat empathetic, thinking how easy it is for that to take place. And if you don't have the tools, you don't have them. I think the clerk made a comment of, and that environment was part of why he or she, I don't even know what the gender of the clerk was, retired. Throw the towel in. I can't, I'm not gonna be accountable when I don't have the resources to do the job. I mean, we're fortunate, and it's expensive, but it's dangerous. So as I went through this, and went through this again today with Brian, and top of that article, I think we just have to remember, one of our responsibilities as a board is to make sure that the town has highly competent, skilled, very knowledgeable employees to get the job done. I know we talk about the tools, and I often think about the sewer camera. I asked Scott the other day, so I don't hear any sewer camera stories. You use that thing or not? You know, what's the scoop? Say, my God. So we had to get another set of wheels because they were thread worn. And I mean, it's a tool to the job, but your human resource is a huge tool also. Brian did a good job discovering that maybe this wasn't 100% tax exempt, and he's done a good job, I think, negotiating to get it where it needs to be.
Jim did well.
And Jim, that
I would like to state that Brendan did reserve the right to petition, past the end of the month. I know you don't like moving things tonight, but if you don't petition and file your petition with the Supreme Court by the end of the month, it's done. You don't get that opportunity.
So it's your recommendation we should pass this draft resolution this evening versus Monday?
Yes.
And I mean, I haven't sat in on these with Jim either, and it was a very good meeting. I felt the town was well represented in this negotiations with CDPH.
That would alleviate some court actions on Brendan's part and Jim's part too.
Yeah, I can't see any reason to delay it and take a chance for some more exposure, right? I have to go with your recommendation. Do we have any other questions on this, or any other questions of Brian? Because if not, I'm going to put a number on that draft for later in our meeting. Okay, thank you.
It's gonna go to, according to this, and then it'd be attached there too, and I assume this is what you're attaching.
Right.
Which will show the percentages and all the things to go with resolution.
Brian has a spreadsheet that gives you a lot more detail. You want to look at it for each, say, the highway department and every special district and so forth. It's very detailed. So, in fact, he's got it right there.
Brian, can you email me that to my town office computer?
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, it's a lot to digest in a short period, but none of it's going to change 7 days from tonight, other than it could be a deeper hole.
We'll just save some paperwork with the judge.
And some legal fees. They always have to be
This
alert
was
to
the
save
refund of
costs.
$1 million. No, see the county's first line item. Right, this was our total special districts and all of us, 14,000.
That would be a 254, correct?
Yes, over 5 years, it's that much per year.
Not for us.
No, it's not too good for the others.
And the school district, of course, has the most skin in this game. They've been good to work with us to share some of the costs. When we talk about creating a line to reserve for some of these appraisal fees, we don't pay 100% usually. And I believe if it's over $1 million, the county will come in as well, and at that point, the town ends up with, I think, 26% of the total cost, which
Does
is,
it have to be over $1 million? Over.
I think they have that by resolution, it has to be more than.
This was a settlement reduction, this is $1 million settlement. It'd be for Benderson and Pyramid is really what it is, when we're talking $20 million, it is negotiated.
Okay, but if this adjustment were $1,000,001, would Quinn County come in?
Only if we went on to court.
Only.
This is a settlement adjustment, this is not a court adjustment. If it was we're talking, they thought that when we kept going on into court, then you might be able to rope them in. But they will go hands, not our job, not our worry. So, no offense, but that's the way it goes at that level. Until you get to Pyramid, that's where Bernie's talking about, For Pyramid, you're looking at, on an average, everywhere else but here, around $90 to $105 a square foot for their unit. West Falls is at $33 a square foot for aviation. We're at 66. So there's room for us to go. And I'm talking Watertown's at 95. New Hartford, they're all similar markets. They're much higher price per square foot for the overall facility. So that's a lawsuit coming because you push that up to $90 a square foot, we're looking at a $25 million jump.
But again, process what Brian's saying that we would believe, based on the data, it should be at this higher rate. Obviously, they're not going to agree to it. So the question's going to be, does the assessor have the board behind him and the funds to get it to where it needs to be?
So we do our assessment, we pay to get somebody assessing it, right, then you have ammunition to go in.
That's the big issue.
Well, that's what's gonna happen, that's why we're having this conversation, because you go through commercial next year, you're gonna have a few of them. You will automatically have Pyramid, you will automatically have Henderson. And those appraisals and said and done, a trial in court and lawyer, specialized lawyer, with that jet too, it's gonna run you, $80, $90, $100,000.
We went through that a few years ago. with
Right,
Pyramid.
did in '06, now we're almost 9 years later. So that has to be at least thrown out there so that you're aware that there can be some costs in front of you if you go down that path.
Can you, in passing, check the assessed valuation in Glens Falls? Compared to our assessed valuation?
Totals?
It's gotta be substantially higher than ours.
The city wants it? They were gonna go into,
That actually
That
isn't that
should-
hard to find either,
This
because
is
all that
city,
should be on one.
yeah,
City of
According
Glens
to the
Falls,
council.
total assessed value and taxable assessed value.
Yeah.
That way you have, like,
Right.
we are 1.4 billion as ours keeps working on, and with a 1.1 tax.
There.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone have anything else for Brian? We're ready to get home.
Further discussion, I think next work session you set me up for?
I haven't said it yet.
Okay.
We'll meet and get our ducks in order. It's a strong recommendation to get something in the budget.
yeah.
Oh, no,
Oh,
you
yeah.
wanted to go through pictometry and
Oh, the
numbers?
pictometry, yes. I don't even remember if I
August
put that
11th,
on
you
for the
said?
next one. I think so. Yeah, Brian's, we have the new pictometry flyover.
We gotta find a
give
laptop
us a
so I can
demo.
Wi-Fi out.
You didn't get one of those while I was
What, are you
gone?
buying my laptop?
Have you ever looked at the state contract purchasing website? I don't know if you could find a Dell computer in there.
We need to talk about that. I thought that was resolved.
I was told to go look for a thing on state contract, and I'm like, how do you work this thing? Even Patrick's like, they do it deliberately, so nobody knows what's going on. You can't just go computers, laptop, and get a state contract price. It doesn't work that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening. Hopefully
Okay.
things move a lot faster now.
Number
I'll give you
one.
a name. Joe Tesoria. Remember Joe? You know Joe? He was
Yeah.
the purchasing agent at SUNY. I think he's now retired.
No, he's still there.
He's still there?
Oh.
Joe can tell you how to do it,
All right.
okay?
Yes. I'll touch base with you on getting this. Cause, no, but we'll get something in here so that I can show a demonstration, let people see what we bought.
Okay, great,
Thanks,
you.
Brian.
thank you.
Number one, services of a surveyor. This was on the agenda just to kind of clear up. I emailed everybody, but some of the emails sometimes didn't work as well as other times. And had some email conversations with Marty. Before I left, we were talking about a single parcel, not getting into the subdividing and so on. But we also were talking about the need to retain a easement, right-of-way access into the property off 3, so we didn't box ourselves in. And I guess, and I think Marty, you probably deserve the credit on that. Anyway, it worked out that why not subdivide it into 2 parcels, one that could be 4 lots and one that could be 2. They could stay, and that way we have the retained access versus try and get a easement right away from the buyer of the whole property. Makes perfect
So
sense.
basically,
In
between the two, we would own that
Correct.
area.
In talking with planning looked at it and said, forget about the lines are only there for illustrative purposes. We're not gonna subdivide, some developer could subdivide. What would happen, because we're not gonna do it by easement, we're gonna retain ownership of a piece of land. So consequently, we would effectively sell 2 lots, one being approximately half the size of the other. Okay? The other thing that we would need to discuss would be, are we gonna tie the 2 pieces of property together? Are we gonna say, we're gonna accept bids, but the bids have to be on both pieces of property, or are we gonna accept them separately? A developer might say, look, I'm interested, but I don't want a situation where somebody comes in and buys the top piece, and then I got the bottom piece, and I don't, it's incompatible what he's gonna do with the upper piece, so we just need to discuss that and decide whether or not we wanna tie that in so that it's a sale of what amounts to the strip.
Any quick thoughts on that, Jim, shooting from the hip?
No, and I love to shoot from the hip, but I don't, I guess, first of all, requiring somebody to buy both parcels is less saleable, in that just, but Marty has a good point that if you want to sell one and maybe you want to link it up to the other because somebody's going to do something with one. I assume we're going to listen to the realtor?
Yes.
I think we just asked them what they think would give us the greatest amount of money. What would be the most saleable, if they had to sell?
And again, the drawing using some pictometry software is illustrated. And we use that model based on the approximate 1 acre lot to the easternmost end that's not part of the parcels being sold. And we guesstimated you'd have 6 lots plus or minus an acre.
Now, all of this land that you see that's on the red line, all of that is considered, was never used for, say.
All of this property on this end, this is the park and whole. To
So-
give you this.
Okay, so is it just this strip that was not used for,
Well, it would go back farther. You can see some trails that are, so probably this is all, a dead
Okay,
end
yeah,
zone.
okay.
very, very, very clearly, though, that property would not be. I would guess our surveyor may try to take this westernmost corner where we see the red lines and maybe just square that off. I don't know if we need that job. But that's what was the intention was. I think it's a good one.
Is the frame of the park?
Pardon me?
The red is the frame.
Continue to own it.
Yeah, that's a good way.
I
to put it.
believe so,
Is
yeah.
that, Bernie,
Just so if anyone's seeing it black and white, it just, the red is the frame of the park.
Bernie, are you indicating that that piece that says 1 acre lot is in fact a piece that could be included in
No,
what we sell?
No, that was just to illustrate what roughly an acre would look like dimensions wise.
Okay.
That is not our property.
That's not our
Correct.
property, okay. So then I at a loss to understand what you were talking
Well,
about.
The way this was just drawn, and this was a little easier, we left this notch, maybe we wanna
Oh.
just square it off. So we have a straight line border here, add a little property there, and we can maybe add a little bit of price too. I mean, they don't have to look like this. This was done just to see how many acre lots plus or minus. So I would suggest maybe we just move this back a little. So these are a little deeper than these. Otherwise, we're gonna have this little notch.
Mm-hmm.
We wanna get all we can out of these. It's about that.
Come down to here.
Or do that, yeah, square it off right there.
Square that.
Sure.
Yes.
We'll see what the surveyor comes up with, give us
This
some
is,
ideas.
but this area here is not part of Katyville Park right now.
Well, the whole, everything in that, the big boundary, as Mike said, this is the footprint of the park.
Right.
And again, easier to see on this with the color. The red is the footprint of the entire
So
park.
where's our ball field?
Ball fields are back here.
Right here?
Yeah.
This is more your entry area.
Right there's the tennis courts.
It's not
Ball
capturing
fields
the
are over
full,
here. It's not the whole thing. This
yeah,
is,
it's not
Okay,
capturing
it's
the
not, that's why I
first
was saying,
section.
this part over here, okay, so we do
Right.
have quite a bit of land.
oh,
Yes,
a ton.
According to what it looked like.
yes.
Yeah. Ball fields are actually off that to this side.
That's-
Remember when we went, we had two pieces of land over here that we were, this was the one piece that is kind of the park that we're more familiar with, and then this was the other piece.
Mhm.
And on this piece, there's some cross-country trails and the golf course.
You can see the print of those trails in through there where they've had the casual.
But there's a lot of still
Disc
trails
golf in
in here.
here.
Square
Oh,
area.
gosh,
We
yeah.
wanted them,
They actually go back off this property and down to the lake.
Yeah.
There's real future, to expand that. Okay, any other questions on that? Just wanted to clarify a little bit. You've got a letter for the resignation of Kevin Keene. Kevin's been a good employee. He brought a lot of skills to that department in the area of technology. He was used by Scott and Dave prior to on the computer. But he's got a position that he's excited about, working with the state, and it'll be quite different. He'll be involved with grants, grant writing. He's a little anxious, I think, as any young man would be that goes off a new direction, but it will be a resolution coming up to accept his resignation, and we're gonna wish him well, and hopefully everything works out for him in his new endeavor. I know he was a little curious, could I get a leave of absence just in case? He's not running from us, but we may actually come across his name again in the future as we are working for grant funding, so it may not be all bad. The next item is request of road name change. This request came from Emergency Services. No rocket science here, renaming Fairgrounds, 2 words, to the Fairgrounds, 1 compound word road.
and adding an S.
And, well, there was an S on grounds before, I guess. And this is for 911 purposes, safety and all that. I doubt there are any problems with that.
There's 2 fairground,
I honestly don't even know. It's, goes in the computer better, I guess. Number 4, contract of services. This one is a little more complex. The property on the Stafford Road that we are in process of doing a demo. The real short version, I'm sure you've read through the notes, is that the entire property is deemed to have asbestos, and it's going to require a total different process for cleaning it up, obviously much more expensive. I talked about the importance of good staff. I spoke with Steve today. He's contacted DOT. You might remember just a couple weeks ago, there was a story in the newspaper about the town of Malone, I believe. I don't think it was the city, I think it was the town.
Yep.
With the demolition of a building and the removal of the debris, they had a huge fine. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was maybe $50,000 or $60,000. 200,000?
That's what I believe.
That was way off. I knew it was huge. That feels huge right now. Steve has made a number of calls, has really worked on this, and Deborah spent quite a bit of time doing some research. I know Jim was involved again. I don't mean to leave his non-billable hours out. What the recommendation is that we would do, our code enforcement officer has the ability, he'll need a resolution, some board support, a stop work order, which would then cause this process that we've begun to unravel. The billable hours that have been created for the demolition and removal, which are very few at this point, would still be able to be recovered, and then we'll have to go back through bidding this possibly. If we can find a firm that stays under 20,000, I'm not optimistic. We'll be okay. If it's going to be more than 20, we'll have to go out to bid. Steve had done, again, quite a bit of research in what this is going to require. The costs are astronomical to, and he doesn't believe we're even going to find a company in the area.
Abandoned now.
It's part of this, it's a classic example of the game that gets played. The game that gets played at the civil service level, the game that gets played at the commercial company level. What happened was we hired LeBaire subs to this other company to go in, the other company is to go in and to take a look to determine if there's any asbestos in the building. They don't even enter the building. They approach the building and they say, oh, it's too dangerous to go into that building because there's been a fire in the building. So they're not gonna go into the building because it's too dangerous to go into the building. And the state's law says, if that's the case, we consider the entire building to be asbestos. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, where do they make up these rules? And consequently, you're faced with, you know, if you have to treat it as if all of that debris is asbestos, I mean, the cost is crazy.
But there's no proof that it is.
There's absolutely no proof that it is.
That
And
any
if they
building-
take it out and they bring it, you know, to one of the two places that will take it, and they get it there and they say, well, that isn't asbestos, you know? There's no relief.
No.
You know?
There's no
You're
way,
gonna pay- you're
there's
gonna
no way
pay-
we can determine, no company will actually determine if there's asbestos in it?
No. They're gonna bring it over and it's gonna be bagged and it's gonna be considered as if it's asbestos. And you're gonna pay as if it's asbestos. I mean, it's insane.
Or be fined to the high heavens.
You know, so exactly how
And this all goes on county taxes.
that is, you know, we don't end up with the bill, if you will. It goes on the county roll. Now, you got an empty lot on the Wallace Hill Road. The county has to reimburse us.
And hope they recover the funds from the sale of the property, which
Yeah,
in
but you
this
can't.
case,
If you're taking that
this
much money
case isn't gonna happen.
because it's asbestos when it's not.
But
Yep.
why we don't have, you know, where where are the other officials and where's the outrage? I mean, you would think that there would be a bunch of people who would be pounding on, you know, the DEC's door, saying, you know, come on, fellas, we gotta rethink this process, this is crazy.
Well, can we pass a resolution sent to the DEC then?
In the meantime, we're gonna do a stop work order and
We're gonna do a
Reverse
stop
this
work
process.
order so that we can pay Mr. LaWare for the time and effort.
But on the stop work order, can we, if he's not working now, right?
No, he's not, he's actually.
We can just enter into a contract with him, pay him what he's worth, and
No, you can't.
why not?
That's part of the stuff you do to get you into deep debt. I asked Steve that. I said, can't we just stop and pay him for what he's done? And he said, no, you can't. You have a contract with the man, and the only way you can do that is you have to legally do a stop work order, and.
Is that because it's asbestos?
I think so.
Any other contract can just simply
Yeah,
stop.
I think it's because it's
Oh, that's-
asbestos,
no.
it's like, you know, you're trying to get out from underneath the asbestos.
Okay, maybe that's special, I'm just saying, any other contract can just call the person and say, okay, you've done enough. And sort of like this, right here, we just stipulate,
Yeah.
that's the end of it.
It all comes down to this regulation that if, you know, if somebody won't go in, you know, to test it, then there's this gross assumption that it is asbestos.
Can we get another person to do it?
I don't know that answer.
I don't know, I spent a little time with Steve going over this today, I know Marty spent a lot more time, and I'm,
The disposal of it, say if we dispose it in the landfill, the cost is horrific.
you can't, you're not going to this landfill, it's down the road, there's
You gotta
a
go-
lengthy hauling of this.
You can dump asbestos in this one, though.
This particular project can't be.
Oh.
Again, I don't have all the, I know
But the
Steve spent
cost
a
of
lot of time.
Getting rid of in a landfill is
Oh, yeah.
huge. Just one I'm aware of was 200,000.
I remember when the teachers in Peru and the board in Peru got into a real, you know, snake fight, and somebody turned in the board and said that they were processing asbestos. And the next thing they knew, they had all kinds of people all over that school, and they had to, you know, it cost Peru all kinds of money.
What happened to that other outfit there, Optech, that did the other two houses? Where did they do, nobody bid on this, that's what I couldn't
Yeah.
understand, he was the only one. That other outfit, Optech, that did the other two houses for us, you know, were the same thing.
Well,
They were
we didn't know
marked.
there was asbestos initially here, did we?
We didn't expect,
It's a stick-built home. Why would you, it's not that old that it would have had a lot of asbestos in the construction materials.
They consider
We
floor
didn't do
tile and all of that, that's, some of
Beyond a
that stuff
certain
is
year,
way-
it all had
I
asbestos.
know,
Oh, yeah.
but it goes way over the zero limit of stuff.
I mean, the bully in our case is going to be
Yeah, I know.
government regulation. We just can't afford to gamble. So anyway, that's again, the short version of, appreciate your involvement, Marty, with these issues while I was gone, keeping things
the
rolling.
real answer would be if the lady who owned the place was not in jail, she could hire somebody and they could take the debris and they could bury it on her land and nobody would say or do a thing. It's totally allowable.
Yep.
You know?
But now we're involved. And the property shows the property next door, I believe, which is currently abandoned, so we're gonna go through this again.
Yeah, it's a wonder that the bank won't even step up on it. The same thing.
Yep, everybody's gonna write it off. Okay, Chief Randall.
I haven't had a chance to get a hold of the chief. It's not the chief that should be honored, it's the fireman
Yep.
that's mentioned, who was the person who did the heroic work.
Dave Rabideau, I believe.
Correct.
And, do you all have a copy of that letter?
Yeah.
It
Is
was,
this number 5 on it?
this is number 5, titled Chief Revenue, Chief Randall.
I put a call in, and asked if he could call me, but I know, I think they meet on Monday nights, so maybe you'll get the message tonight.
And I'm going to move, based on, some of Marty's recommendation, because he's the one that's been involved with this, but we may want to follow up with a, board resolution in support, once we hear a little more from the chief as well.
Right.
Certainly, don't want to just go from the letter any more than we would if it was a negative letter. We get some more facts, but we certainly may want to consider, as we've done in some other instances, acknowledging Mr. Rabideau for his efforts and, very more positive results to prevent a bigger crisis. So you've got to call in.
I've got to call in to the chief.
But we want to make sure everybody's aware and that this is works in progress. Pest training, the reason this is on, just a couple things. You've got the information. There is a session in Keysville. I've also got a session scheduled with Bonnie Black, part of the services we pay for through Behavioral Health Services North. Bonnie's come in a few times. We've talked with her about doing some pest training, maybe a follow-up to violence in the workplace as well.
So the one here is in Keysville?
This one's Keysville. I haven't had time to really look through this or talk to Bonnie about this. I don't know, that this is any different than what she's going to do for us. Pest training should be done by all of our employees, and we don't want to send all of them to Keysville. That's the short version. But it's also purposeful to let you know some of the, what other services we get with these agreements. I think Behavioral Health Services and EAS, I know, is $25 per employee. We get a lot of service. So that's what that's about. Next, we go on to the second part of this, draft resolutions. You've got the minutes. I have not been able to look them over. Hopefully you have. If you see something, let me know. I wasn't there, so I can't reflect on whether they're accurate or not. The next item is actually a resolution with a number awarding bid bond. Our finance manager had asked that we consider this evening. He believes he will save us some money. He will save money if we lock this thing in as opposed to the attorney fees that come up. We are in year 4 of the current ban. And with that intro, let's get it on the table anyway. Rick, if you would read resolution number 253, Highway Road Improvement Statutory Installment Bond.
Where the town board approved resolution 11-183 on May 16, 2011, for the issuance of a bond anticipation note for the amount not to exceed $1 million for highway improvement. Whereas resolution dated May 16, 2011, delegated the supervisor with the authority to convert the ban to a bond. And whereas the current ban matures on August 8, 2014, and interest rates have been sought for a 5-year statutory installment bond to replace the existing highway road improvement ban in an amount not to exceed $675,000. Whereas the following interest rates were submitted to the finance manager, as so noted, with Glens Falls National Bank and Trust Company submitting the lowest interest rate now. Therefore be resolved that the town board award the highway road improvement ban renewal to Glens Falls National Bank and Trust Company, and the supervisor is hereby authorized to sign any and all necessary documents pertaining to the statutory installment bond, and a certified copy of this resolution be given to the finance manager and the highway superintendent.
Have a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Cashman, second.
A second for purpose of discussion.
Mr. Mannix, discussion.
I don't think that the resolved is correctly worded. and I just caught this, it refers to the band renewal, okay? We're not renewing the band.
No, we're
issuing a bond
issuing a bond.
for requesting the issuance of a bond. Okay?
No objection.
So we might,
Resolved that the board award the 5-year statutory installment bond to replace the existing highway road improvement ban in the amount of $675,000. And that the supervisor is hereby, to Glens Falls National Bank and Trust Company, and the supervisor is hereby authorized to sign.
I think I've got that.
I'll do it again. Resolved that the board award the highway, road, excuse me, let me just take a minute to get back to where I was. That the board award the 5-year statutory installment bond to replace the existing highway road improvement ban in the amount of $675,000 to Glens Falls National Bank and Trust, and the supervisor is hereby authorized to sign all necessary documents pertaining to the statutory installment bond.
I think I've got it.
Okay?
Mike, you?
No objection.
No objection to that. Anyone have any other discussion? As amended, roll call vote.
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Mark Manick,
Yes.
Michael Cashman.
Yes.
Bernie Bass.
Yes, resolution
Too
carries.
bad they can't have the same rate that they give me for my interest on the deposit.
And you know, I asked Pat about that this afternoon, and he reminded me, this is just a 5-year. Because we had recently gone out and gotten some pretty sweet numbers on 30-year. And that was the lowest. But yeah, I was a little surprised that it was even that much. The next thing that I have, I've added is a resolution 254, which would be the resolution to settle the Article 7 with CDPH as discussed.
Oh, I thought it was a resignation.
No. 17, did we do this?
We're not gonna do that here, we'll do that Monday.
Oh, okay.
The only resolution, next
254.
4 would be the CDPH Article 7, which you should have a draft of that. And if there's no further concerns, I would ask our clerk to read the resolution, please.
Whereas an Article 7 proceeding under the real property tax law was commenced by Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital Medical Center as petitioner against the Board of Assessment Review and Assessor of the Town of Plattsburgh and the Town of Plattsburgh as respondents. And whereas said petitioner and respondents have met and have come to an agreement on the merits without cost to either party regarding taxation of parcel owned by the petitioner. Now therefore be resolved that James Coffey Esquire is hereby authorized on behalf of the Town of Plattsburgh to execute a stipulation of settlement and a copy of which too is attached and made their part of. And further resolved that a copy of this resolution be given to the finance manager and a copy to the town assessor.
So moved.
Okay, I had a couple of changes I was making here, thank you, Rick. We have a motion by Mr. Mannix, second,
Second.
Mr. Wood. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Thomas Wood,
Is there something that you had to change?
Well, no, Ricky read the and be it further, which wasn't typed in the original, and just a couple clerical errors. Why I was hesitating, Tom, is we discussed this at length earlier, and I would really like to memorialize that by saying, yes, there was a discussion, but we didn't have it at this time, so it's probably not appropriate. The roll call?
okay. Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Mark Mannix,
Yes.
Michael Cashman.
Yes.
Bernie Bass.
Yes, resolution carries. Nice job on that, John. The next we have is a draft of the resignation of Mr. Keene, which we will have next time as well. And that's it as I see on my agenda for this evening. I'd ask again, and you've all been very good, Tom did it earlier, for some reason vacations, we're getting to the last month, I should say second month of summer, I hate to say last. Any reason, you know, you're not able to be here, you're on vacation, letting us know ahead, just keeps everybody tuned in every, to be a little more sensitive that we make sure we have a quorum. God forbid we never have an agenda, because I think we always do, it's always business.
I think we'll say for the benefit of those in attendance that Mr. Renadin is not with us tonight because he is off to New York City to help celebrate the birth of his first grandson.
All right.
Okay,
Oh, nice.
Good for him.
everybody doing well?
Apparently.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, and with that said, again, thank you, Marty, for steering the ship these last few days. I appreciate it, and the communications back and forth is very helpful. Find my agenda, and with that said, I'm going to log us out at 8:11.